Hello and welcome to the AgCulture Podcast, where we share insights about the future of agriculture. Each week, we dive into the stories, technology, and ideas shaping a profitable and sustainable future for farms and rural communities alike. I'm Paul Windemuller, host of the AgCulture Podcast, and today we're going to be airing a talk that I gave at the Milk Business Conference in Las Vegas back in December. Now, I had the honor of being one of the main stage speakers at the event, and it was a great event. Really encourage you, if you're in the dairy industry in the U.S., it's a great event to attend, one of the best that I really appreciated being at. Now, this talk really highlights my journey of understanding the importance of data and technology and all of that wrapped together, and what that journey has looked like over the past few years in part of my dairy farm business, as well as what I've been learning outside of that, visiting farms around the world through my Nuffield scholarship journey. And before we get into the episode, I just wanted to mention, if you could go to whatever platform you're listening to this on right now and give a rating, and if you'd be so kind, even a review of our podcast, leave a little message there. That is one of the main ways that bumps our podcast up in the rankings in order for people to find it better. So if people are looking for podcasts around agricultural technology, around stories from people around the world in agriculture, that is how they find it, by you guys leaving a rating on our podcast. So really appreciate it if you could take a quick second to do that. I don't ask that very often, but I just really wanted to highlight that because, again, it's one of the ways that, and sharing this episode with somebody that you think would find it valuable, are the ways that we grow our audience at the AgCulture Podcast. So with that, hope you enjoy this episode from the Milk Business Conference. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today. And before I get started, I want to preface something. I'm here to speak to you today, not as a software engineer or a data analyst. I'm a dairy farmer. I'm a dairy farmer who spent the last several years traveling around the world studying artificial intelligence and ruminant livestock. Now, before we get into everything, I want to start out with something very simple, and that's my story. Now, I didn't grow up on a dairy farm, and because of that, I was never the person who could walk into a barn and instantly breed a cow. Now, I really admired the people that could do that, but that wasn't my starting point. My wife, Brittany, and I, What I did have was a desire to learn, a willingness to work, and an early belief that information could help me bridge the gap. My wife, Brittany, and I started farming with nothing but a dream and a whole lot of optimism. In 2013, we bought a rundown, non-operating dairy farmstead. And it had no parlor, no cows, no freestall barn. And we had no money. We just had a big vision. By 2014, we had a lot of sweat equity and some creative thinking and about $20,000 that allowed us to start our farm. Now, in those early years, I relied on every tool that I had, which wasn't very much. You can see here in these pictures, that first picture there with me and my cow Buttercup. She was the first cow that I ever bought. I went to the sale barn. I wanted to buy a few cows, and this cow came out. She was scrawny, she was small, and nobody bid on her. So guess what? I came home with her. That was our first cow, and I'm happy to say she made it 6 lactations, performed very well after we got her going. Those other two pictures are of the original parlor that I built in our tie stall barn that was on the farm. Now that pit in the parlor there that you see in that picture, I dug that by hand. I poured the concrete with a friend of mine, and my dad and I welded up the frame to the parlor. And that's how we got started. Now, every 6 weeks we'd run herd tests, and I'd spend evenings studying the numbers that we got from those. I was trying to understand how this biological system responded to the choices that I was making. Our progress was slow because I never had the full picture of what was going on the farm. I had a little bit of data, but not a whole lot of clarity to turn that information into good decisions. But in 2017, everything changed. We installed milking robots. We put wearable sensors on our cows, and almost overnight, a different world opened up to me. Instead of snapshots every 6 weeks, we had real-time streams of heat cycles, milk production, rumination, milk quality, activity, and health indicators. And for the first time in my career, my short career as a dairy farmer, I could actually see what was going on. Suddenly, patterns were visible that I could never have detected manually. And my breeding improved, and my cull rates dropped dramatically. The efficiency of the entire operation had shifted. And here's what became very clear to me. Data didn't replace. Lord knows I didn't have a whole lot of it. But it did strengthen what I did have. And it made me a better manager, it made me a better observer, and ultimately a better dairyman. But it did something else as well. It showed me a path that was clouded before that. A path where data led to insights, which led to better decisions, which led to better outcomes. Something very simple, right? And once you see that progression, once you experience what it feels like when information moves, and you begin to wonder, what would it look like if this cycle got even faster? What would it look like if the insight didn't just stay on the farm, but connected across the systems, across farms, and across the whole supply chain? What would it look like if farmers, the people who generate the data, actually controlled the value that it creates? Those questions became the foundation of what was called my Nuffield International Scholarship, where I traveled across 16 countries over the last 2 years, visiting hundreds of farms, startups, research labs, and technology companies, many of which are well known. What I saw convinced me that we're at the beginning of one of the most important shifts in the history of dairy. But to understand where we're heading and why it matters for every farm represented in this room, I think it's a good idea to revisit a different technological transformation. Electricity. The story of electricity isn't about power generation. It's about scale, capability, and what becomes possible when a system gains a new source of leverage. To understand where AI is taking agriculture, I want you to think of this simple quote that I heard from Jeff Bezos that really stuck with me. He said, AI is like a horizontal enabling layer, much like electricity in the 20th century. Now, every task 120 years ago pretty much relied on physical labor. Every process was limited by the speed of your hands and the hours in your day. Then electricity arrived, not all at once and not without resistance, but it started with simple things. A motor here, a light bulb over there. But once farmers saw what it could do, something shifted. Electricity made it possible to look at jobs in a new way. It made scale possible. It changed the shape of the farm, the number of cows that we could manage, and the very economics of agriculture. Electricity multiplied labor. And here's the part most people forget. Electricity wasn't invented, it was harnessed. We all know the story from grade school of Ben Franklin and his kites experiment. 150 years before the commercialization of electricity. But nothing happened until it was harnessed, and then everything changed. Now let's come back to present day. We're standing in front of the next transformation. One that is just as foundational, but this time it's not physical power. It's intelligence. Now, intelligence has always existed, just like electricity. But what's changing today is our ability to capture, organize, and apply intelligence across systems. Artificial intelligence isn't some magic invention. It's simply the structured harnessing of patterns, taking what the human brain misses or cannot comprehend at scale and make it available almost instantly. Where electricity multiplied labor, AI multiplies research, data integration, and decision making. Where electricity allowed one person to do the work of 5, AI allows one manager to understand 1,000 variables at once. Now think about the complexity of a dairy operation. A modern day dairy farm is probably one of the most complex biological systems known to man, right? You have cow health, you have reproduction, you have genetics, labor, feed inventory, weather, milk markets, nutrient management, input costs, the list goes on. And any one of those can shift the economics of a farm. Now combine it, and it becomes a system too complex for a human brain to track alone, at least not with the precision that modern day agriculture requires of us today. So again, what electricity did for physical labor, AI will do for cognitive labor. Now, electricity didn't change the world because someone invented a light bulb. It changed the world when we built out the infrastructure to make electricity usable. And just like electricity needed infrastructure, like poles and wires and transformers and power generation, AI needs infrastructure too. So what is that infrastructure? Well, clean, structured, and scalable data, compute power to store and work the data, and interoperable systems that allow the intelligence to flow. Without that foundation, AI might look pretty impressive on paper, but it won't move the needle on our farms. This is where the conversation about clean data comes in. Because without clean data, none of the intelligence we're talking about is even possible. So let's go there next. There's one thing that I saw in almost every country I visited, and that's most farms didn't have a technology problem. They had a data quality problem. And it's not because farmers are doing anything wrong. It's because our systems have grown faster than our structure to support them. Now, I was on a farm a couple of weeks ago, not in the US. It was a large dairy, had multiple locations, and I was talking to the dairyman there and asking him about some of the issues that he has with his data systems. And he said, well, we have multiple locations where we milk cows, but only one location where we treat them. So we'll move the cows from whatever location they were at to the one farm to do the treatments. This is a risk mitigation strategy that they had. But their systems wouldn't tell them where that cow originated from. So they were not able to see if they had a health issue at a certain farm. Now they're getting different answers or no answers at all because they didn't have the data quality. Now we're trying to make high stakes, highly complex decisions from incomplete and inaccurate information. It's not because the tools are bad, but it's because the foundation layer that we're using is unstable. And if the foundation is unstable, everything built on top of that is somewhat unpredictable. Now, so that, in that case, dirty data steals value. Clean data doesn't necessarily guarantee success, but it gives you the right starting point. So now that we've looked at clean versus dirty data, let's talk about why so much data ends up fragmented in the first place. Now, if you look across your operation right now, most of the systems you rely on, which are your herd management, feed management, accounting, milk quality, and breeding tools, all came to your farm probably at different times and are probably built by different companies to provide a very narrow set of solutions. So here's the thing. Almost every major software system on your farm was built for one person, not for the business. Think about it. Your herd management software was built for your herd manager. Your feed software was built for your feeder or nutritionist. Your accounting software was built for your bookkeeper. And your parlor software was probably built for those that handle milk quality or your milking staff. And each of those systems is doing its job. That's why you have it, right? It's serving the one person it was designed to serve. But here's the pain, where the pain comes in, which you are all well aware of. None of these tools were built for the one person who must understand everything at once. That's you, the farm owner, business manager. You're trying to reconcile each one of these dashboards, right? You're integrating this information and you're trying to make strategic decisions, million-dollar decisions. And a lot of this happens in your head or on a spreadsheet on your computer with 6 tabs open at 10 o'clock at night. I've been there. The ability to make better decisions and faster is now going to be the single largest competitive advantage you can have in dairy. But you can't get there if every system you own is built for a different person. Before AI can work, before benchmarking can work, and before financial forecasting can really work, interoperability must exist. Now, when people hear the word interoperability, their eyes probably glaze over. Many of you probably have just had that. It sounds very technical, right? Something probably for the AWS conference across the road, not for a dairy conference. But let me simplify this. Interoperability is when your systems stop acting like strangers and start acting like a team. Interoperability is not about technology. It's about the flow of information, decisions, and value. Right now in most dairies, this is what happens. You, the owner, become the integration layer. Not by choice, but by necessity. This is the exact opposite of the leverage modern dairies need. We cannot keep adding complexity to farms without adding a way to manage that complexity. The future farm must think like a system, not like a group of disconnected phones. And that's where interoperability becomes transformational. Now, I want to have you guys raise your hand again if you're a dairy producer in the room. Who do we got here? Okay. Right here. What's your name? Kyle? Ivan. Okay, Ivan. What's one question that you've wanted to ask or find out about your dairy that you thought was way too complex to really dig into?
I want to know what's the lowest hanging fruit? Where can I spend more of my resources to make the biggest impact?
Okay, so investment efficiency on your farm, right? So what would you have to be able to take in for information in order to really figure that out?
You need to take in the accounting information.
Counting?
Each system on your farm is spending, and then you need to figure out the returns, the time costs, just the overall resources that are going to attain a certain goal.
So probably labor, your equipment running costs, time value of money. So probably 6 or 7 systems, right? Yeah. And do you have that today? No. So that's the issue that we're up against right now, right? So when all of those systems can actually work together, when all those pieces of data come together in one system thank you for that, by the way, to give you clear understanding on how it will affect your operation, in an example like that, that's what I'm talking about here. That's what we need to get to as an industry. So when I say interoperability, I don't mean everything is the same system either. And it doesn't have to be from the same company. We as farmers value freedom of choice, right? So what I mean by interoperability is that each system shares clean data into a unified layer where decision-making happens. We don't need another dashboard or app, but an operating layer where the farm's intelligence lives. Think of it as a farm brain, the place where decisions converge, the place where AI continues to learn, and the place where forecasting becomes more accurate. Now, as I said before, once information flows, everything can speed up. Decisions that used to take hours, in that example, that would probably take you weeks and weeks, right? Not just hours. Once this information starts flowing, that can happen in minutes. Insights that used to require intuition, remember, I didn't have that when I started, are now visible to everyone on your whole farm team. And outcomes that once depended on one person's memory or experience now depend on the collective intelligence of the farm. It allows everyone to finally see the same reality. Now we'll shift to the next concept, one that sits directly on top of interoperability, and that's scale. If interoperability is the foundation for a smarter farm, then scale is where the real leverage shows up. But when I say scale, I don't mean more cow numbers or more acres. I'm talking about the scale of insight. When multiple farms begin contributing to a shared intelligence layer, something powerful can happen. We've all seen it before. It's called network effects. For every additional farm that participates, benchmarking gets smarter, predictions get more accurate, and algorithms improve. Supply chain trust grows. In a nutshell, data becomes much more valuable. No single farm, even the biggest, can generate this alone. It only happens when farms move from isolated data to networked intelligence. When you only have your own data, you learn from your own mistakes. That's the slowest and most expensive way to learn. That's a lot of how I learned, so I know. When you have access to broader, anonymized benchmarks, you can see patterns sooner and improve efficiency faster. So let me give you an example of this. Now, if your feed efficiency dropped from 1.6 to 1.4, it's probably going to really get your attention. But if you can see that everyone in your region dropped by 0.2, probably because of some weather shift, well, now you understand text and its impact, and you can react differently. You can react smarter and with confidence. Scale turns information into clarity. And this leads us to the next section. Control. Let's talk honestly for a moment about something that we tend to avoid in this industry. And that's data is becoming one of the most valuable things a farm produces. And most farms don't really control it. And the truth is, when data leaves the farm, it enters somebody else's economics, someone else's models, someone else's leverage. And too often the value that data creates doesn't come back to the farm. Now, it's not some big conspiracy. It's simply the consequence of an industry that digitized rapidly without building out a framework around ownership, permissions, and value distribution. And during my travels, I could see two futures emerging. One is the future where data is captured, aggregated, monetized, but controlled by a small handful of companies. In that future, farmers become data suppliers rather than data owners. But the other future is different. It's a future where farmers individually and collectively control a layer of infrastructure that gives them permissioning control, interoperability across systems, benchmarking visibility, and the ability to capture the value that their data creates. Because everyone wants data, since data is leverage and clarity and efficiency. But farmers produce the data. Farmers operate the biological system that generates the intelligence. Farmers carry the uncertainty and the risk. So farmers should also hold the permissions, the governance, and the ability to capture some of the value. Now, we treat land as an asset, and we treat cows as an asset, and we treat equipment as an asset. But how do you treat data? Data is the single asset on the farm that increases in value the more it is shared. But I believe only if it's shared on the farmer's terms. This is why the next leap in dairy isn't about buying another app or switching software providers. I'm talking about building a neutral farmer-governed data layer that routes data to whoever the farmers give permission and tracks where it goes and what value it creates. In this model, the value stays with the people who generate the data. Now, this is the infrastructure we need as an industry, not for technology's sake, but for the future health, stability, and competitiveness of the dairy sector. What does it look like when farmers harness data the way previous generations harnessed electricity? What is possible when decision-making becomes our biggest form of leverage? And what can each of us do next? Now, on my farm, it started with a few herd tests on paper. Then it evolved into real-time data streams from robots and collars. But the real transformation didn't happen because of the technology itself. It happened because of what the technology made possible. It gave me visibility, it gave me clarity, but it also gave me confidence. And it gave me the ability to make decisions faster with more accuracy and with fewer surprises. That cycle that I mentioned earlier of data leading to insights, leading to better decisions, leading to better outcomes, changed my entire understanding of what my farm could be. And after visiting farms from around the world and speaking with researchers and meeting with technology companies, I've become convinced of something. We're not in a technology revolution. We're in a decision-making revolution. It's now about multiplying the judgment and intuition you already have and scaling it across your entire operation. So here's what I want you to take home from today. Clean data is not optional anymore. It's foundational. Just like clean water is critical for animal health, clean data is critical for decision health. Number 2, interoperability is the next frontier. You can't make great decisions when every system is operating in isolation. A modern dairy is too complex for that. Number 3, scale is leverage. Decision, scale, and network effect. The ability to learn from your farm, your peers, your region, and your supply chain at the same time. Number 4, farmers must control the value of their data that it creates, not in an adversarial way, not by shutting out your vendor partners, but by establishing a structured, neutral, farmer-driven data layer that ensures the value created by your operation flows back to your operation. Opportunity is right in front of us. We now have the tools, the technology, and the leadership across the industry to build infrastructure that dairy needs in order to succeed in a digital age. So in the next 90 days, every farm can do 3 things. Audit your data, clean and standardize what you can control, and start pushing your vendors firmly to integrate. I'm going to skip this slide here and wrap up. But I want to finish with this thought. For over a century, dairy has been built by people who work harder than anyone else in the world. People who manage chaos, navigate uncertainty, and build resilience every single day. But the next era of dairy will be defined by how we make decisions across the entire system, not just by how hard we work. And if we get this right, if farmers lead with clean data, connected systems, and the structure that protects our interests, then the next decade of dairy will be the most powerful, competitive, and resilient period this industry has ever seen. All right. Thanks once again for listening to another episode of the AgCulture Podcast. I hope you were able to glean some nuggets of wisdom out of that talk that I did at the Milk Business Conference. And if you have any questions or comments or interactions, ideas around what you heard, I really want to have more of an engaging conversation on our social media platforms as well as one-on-one. Reach out to me. Really appreciate those conversations. That's how I learn more. And I think that's how we progress in agriculture to help really bring about this AI revolution that's coming one way or another. And we might as well control that and how that works for us in agriculture. So I'm really passionate about that. And if you're listening to this and you're looking for somebody to speak to an audience or maybe come in and speak to your business, I'm open to. Well, I've been doing a lot of speaking engagements. I'll be at the University of Tennessee here shortly. Was at FarmCon I will be at a lot of different events through the next year, really highlighting the developments of AI in agriculture. So, with that, thanks once again for listening. We'll see you next week for another exciting episode of the AgCulture Podcast.